I am here with Robert Annis, and we're going to be speaking about hired for difference, managed for sameness. I really like this topic, and I think it's such a relevant topic. So thank you, everybody, for who's joining and who's still going to join and watch this later on too. Welcome to our Divergent Discussion. My name is Carla Pretorius. I'm a registered psychotherapist, clinical lead at Caboose, and I'm also finishing up, hopefully soon, my PhD at Católica, so I'm a researcher there. Caboose is for neurodivergent people and the organizations and communities around them. Caboose is the platform that bridges the gap between lived experience and everyday reality through community built by people who really, truly get it, and the practical guides designed to actually help wherever life may take you. This is just a reminder to everybody that's here and that will be watching later on that this is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel. Robert and I will share a link on our LinkedIn too. And we'll have time at the end for audience questions. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box and we'll see how many we can get through at the end. Okay, Robert, I'm going to do a bio. Please stop me if I'm saying anything wrong. Robert Annis is an organizational psychologist, executive coach, and co-founder of Neuro. Neuro stands for the Neurodiversity Empowerment, Understanding, and Resilience Organization. Robert works with organizations to help them recognize neurodivergence and cognitive diversity as sources of capability, innovation, and better performance. His work focuses on the organizational systems, leadership behaviors, and invisible workplace expectations that can prevent neurodivergent people from contributing at their best. Through Neuro, Robert is developing practical frameworks, organizational standards, and tools designed to move employers beyond awareness and individual adjustments towards meaningful, measurable organizational change. Robert himself is an ADHD plus and combines lived experience with organizational psychology and extensive experience in leadership transformation and workplace change. Welcome, Robert. Tell me about the plus. What's the plus?
Thank you, Carla. It's a pleasure to be here. I think for me, I find it very important to be open and out there about my neurodivergence, but I don't necessarily expect that from everyone. I think it's whatever's right for you. Throughout my life, I've always been trying to build connection with people and sort of validate. And one of the ways I do that is I overshare. And I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with that experience. So I am very open about it. So the first thing I would say about the plus is it's all kind of new to me. I first started to learn about the differences between my ears during COVID. So sort of 5-ish years ago. And what I found out during that period of time was I had prosopagnosia, which is face blindness. So I don't recognize faces very often. I have aphantasia, which means I don't have a mind's eye. I can't imagine things. So when people sort of say, imagine this, or some sort of concepts in your head that people do all the time. I don't have that ability. We were watching a TV show last night, and there's this moment where there's the lady's face on the television, and then they show something that's happening, and the inference is that's what she's thinking about. I've always thought that was just a storytelling method, right? In the last few years, what I now recognize is most people can do that. They can actually imagine that scene. I can't do that. I don't have that comprehension of what that'd be like. Then obviously there's the ADHD piece, which is very obvious, autism and ADHD, which are both clinically diagnosed about 2 years ago. And then there's dyslexia and there's some other things. But the biggest one is one I'm not spoken about yet, which is SDAM, which is severely deficient autobiographical memory. There's two types of memory, episodic and semantic. Semantic is your memory for facts. Episodic is your memory of experiences. My semantic memory, facts, is pretty good. I can remember facts quite well. My episodic memory is terrible. That's also called autobiographical memory, hence severely deficient autobiographical memory. So my memory of the past is extremely limited. Now, if you put all of that together, so prosopagnosia, face blindness, autism, ADHD, SDAM, etc. It means I could have met Carla before. And it's very likely I wouldn't remember or be able to access that. A lot of people then, because of all these things, think I must be lacking mentally. I must be, stupid, right? I think that's the same for a lot of neurodivergent people. It's sort of, your brain's not as good, therefore you're probably a bit broken. What's actually true is, and this relates very much to the topic we're talking about today, if you live in a world that recognizes a certain neurotypical view, shall we say, and you don't have that ability, well, you have to work harder to get to that standard. So what you actually find is, whilst yes, I do have some difficulties for sure, it's really difficult to walk into a meeting room and not know who I've met before. I have to present to them as if I know. I have to be so aware in that moment that I can recognize their actions, the way they're looking at me, the body language, to figure out if we've met before. And then I have to try and form a conversation with them to make it seem like I remember knowing them. So actually, it can take a lot of effort and intelligence to work with it. But that's the only sort of world I know, right? That's how my brain works. And I think that's something that we can definitely talk about, is the fact that it's a big assumption from all organizations that people know that they're neurodivergent and they know how to deal with it.
Yeah, this is so true. And thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
It's super interesting too. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to share more about the awareness that we learn about our neurodivergence so that others can relate and see, oh, okay, wait, I can see myself in there. I actually, when you were speaking about the different conditions and profiles, I was thinking about Oliver Sacks, because I absolutely love the books that he wrote. And he wrote about a lot of these conditions that weren't really spoken of, and we weren't as familiar of them when we studied psychology back, 20 years ago. So I think it's very interesting to listen to your conversations and follow what you're saying, and then also, learn from others and see where you relate. Like Einstein said, we can't measure intelligence by if a fish can climb a tree, because then the fish will be seen as not smart.
Yeah. Which is exactly what we do with most neurodivergent people, isn't it? We measure them in ways that don't match them at all. I think one of the problems as we get more advanced as a species is we start to think we know everything, right? If we can go to the moon, if we can go to the deepest depths of the ocean, if we can build AI, well, we must be superhumans. And yet we understand about 2 to 3% of our own brains. We have no comprehension about how to understand or measure neurodivergence. My autism and ADHD assessments were just somebody asking me questions about my behaviors. That's not a measurement, right? I think it's interesting that we make sweeping statements and sort of just accept them. I saw a LinkedIn post the other day, and it was meant to be supporting neurodivergent people, but it was saying things like autistic people aren't good in social environments. Autistic people hug a lot. Some do, some don't. It's absurd. Autism isn't something that's a blood test. It just means your brain is different. So there's lots of variation.
Yeah, it's so different. When we go back to our topic now, you've described a common organizational contradiction. And I really want to get into that. Hiring people for their unique strengths, which we're starting to do, but then often managing them or us towards sameness. So what does that look like in practice for you, and why does this happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those strange things that we do at the beginning when organizations are hiring. There is some recognition, not total, some recognition that organizations want to hire the best, right? This is, as a concept, polluted by the idea of, we've got a good employee, let's take their role and create a new job description of it. That does happen. That's not recruiting for difference, that is recruiting for sameness. The point is, we do recognize more individuality in the recruiting process than we do in the employment process. And that's a critical thing, because it means that there's a lot of potential there that is lost over time. Because when you go into the recruitment space and you're looking for individuals, it's more welcoming, it's warmer, it's more accepting of those differences. And then as time goes by, the employment environment doesn't recognize that as much. Almost all organizations are seeking alignment. Some of this is based on sort of historical mappings in our brain, that we find safety in the sameness, right? If someone thinks and acts like us, then we are more comfortable with them. That's true of anything. If you look at sports, is a really good example, right? If you support my team, I automatically assume you're like me. Right? It's that kind of thinking. And so individuals are rewarded for that loyalty. And it creates a sense of alignment in organizations, which can be very positive. It's great for achieving goals. It's great for achieving strategies. But it also obviously makes it difficult for someone who's different, right? There's no doubt about that. But I don't want to specialize too much on neurodivergence there because it affects lots of different groups of people. It's not just neurodivergent people, right? But we still have very, very clear issues with race and sex and age in business.
Yeah.
And that's on this same sort of topic. And so organizations are doing what they think is right because sameness and alignment makes sense when you want to achieve a goal across a group of people. However, rather than just the moral and ethical problems of sameness dictating that we should all be like and look like one type, there is another major issue. And that is that if everyone is aligned, everyone sort of thinks the same, then you really struggle in times of change. So if you think of vast changes in society like artificial intelligence or the arrival of the internet or a pandemic like COVID, those moments are typified by organizations that can adapt, that are resilient in those changing times. Well, if you want to be like that, then your organization needs very good problem-solving skills, innovation skills, critical thinking skills. And these are not very easily gained by a group of people who think the same way. So actually, organizations, whilst seeking that alignment, they open themselves up to a significant organizational risk that means that change is really, really hard for them. And so they actually can only advance quite slowly. That's one of the key tenets of what we're trying to do at Neuro, is to help organizations see that actually they need cognitive diversity to be innovative, to be problem solving, to have those skills that they need and want to be competitive.
I mean, that sounds great and it sounds lovely, but how do we incorporate that? And then a follow-up question would be how does this kind of look in practice in terms of being more inclusive in the workplace? How can we change the workplace systems to be more inclusive and then make space for that innovative section where we get the more psychological resilient individuals to problem solve?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Carla. And I spent months ruminating on that because I really struggle with it. One of the ways my autism presents is I'm extremely justice focused. I can't handle lying. I can't accept it when I see something that's morally incorrect. And so when we started Neuro, the first look was the justice angle. It was very much a moralistic argument, which is solid. It's a good one, right? People should be treated fairly. We shouldn't have any issue with that. The problem is, well, there's two problems. One, there's already lots of charities and organizations out there making that argument, right? Here in the UK, the National Autism Society, that's their focus, is raising awareness. The problem is they started that journey in 1962, 64 years ago. If in 64 years they've not raised awareness significantly, and I mean no disrespect at all to the organization, it's not working very well in the sense of actually changing society. And then two, I can go to an individual on the street and say, should we do things fairly? And the general answer is going to be, yes, of course we should. But if I go to the CEO of a company and say, you should be more moral and ethical, they're going to say, that's not my job. My job is to make money. All these people who work for me, they need to pay their bills. The only way they can do that is we make money. And so the moral and ethical argument doesn't work there. This is where we struggle. We're trying to make inclusion happen by saying it's a moral and ethical argument. And what we're saying in Neuro is that's a valid argument. It's just not a very successful one. And that is where we slip in. The line I always use in psychology, I think is critical. Anyone who does coaching or anything in the psychological space is you must meet them where they are. And what I mean by that is you may believe something. You may think you're right, but it's completely irrelevant if the person you're talking to doesn't think the same thing. Your opinion is immaterial. And so if we want to change the world, if we want to make it more inclusionary, I don't think it's the right approach to talk about awareness. I don't think it's the right approach to say this is the right thing to do. I agree with it. Of course it is. I just don't think it's going to be very effective. But there is another area that's quite interesting and quite concerning. If I turn around to a general population and say, there's this subgroup, and I'd like them to be treated better. And this is the argument being made for every subgroup, right? The argument is that we should let them in. We should be nice to them. We should include them. Anytime you say we should include them, that means by definition, they're excluded. because they're not in, right? And so as soon as we identify a group, that feels exclusionary, right? We should make space for autistic people. To me, sounds like because they're broken or because they don't fit in or they don't belong. Or what should be happening is the general populace that we want to impact should be going, we want those people. If we have a need, if we have a pull, that is much, much more successful than a push, but it's also much, much, much more empowering for that population. And surely that's the actual goal of inclusion. And so the challenge is, how do we actually make inclusion and not exclusion? Because for sure, if I'm in a workplace and I have to put my hand up and say, excuse me, I'm autistic, I need help, that doesn't help my career prospects. That just makes me more excluded, more likely to be highlighted to everyone else that I'm not a good worker, that I don't fit in, right? Yeah. Inclusion acts exclusionary. And I think that's one of the key problems. So our approach is actually not to focus on those individuals. They'll get helped by us focusing on the system, because it's the system that needs to change. There's no way we can look at an individual and say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That phrase literally means it can't be done. It's a phrase that lies to us. It means that you can't physically do it. We've twisted it to mean it can be done. And it means you're really good. That's not what it means. The reality is an individual cannot change the system around them. They're in the system. They can't do anything about it. So what we're doing is going to leaders and helping them recognize that right now their system that they have, their organization, has a lot of latent ability. Because we're saying to people, we want you to fit into the system. We want you to align. And if you do that, you'll have a career, you'll be rewarded. If you see problems in the organization, it's better for your career not to speak up. If you see that the company's doing something wrong, don't talk about it. Just carry on. That's the current model. If you go into a meeting and your boss has an idea, agree with him, right? If when you're sitting there and you've got some brilliant ideas, but you feel like you probably shouldn't speak up, that's not helping the company. All these areas are areas that we can resolve if we help organizations start to learn how valuable cognitive diversity is to them. That's quite an easy one, because we can simply say, we can help you make more money. We can help you come with better ideas. We can help you solve problems faster. Great. But how do you actually do it? Which is your question. The way we do it is by recognizing that currently, whenever somebody's in a system, there is friction. This friction occurs in a meeting that goes badly. It occurs when you don't get on very well with your boss. It occurs when you go to a meeting and there isn't an agenda and you don't know what's going to happen. It occurs when there's no minutes for meetings, so you don't know what the actions were. So somebody forgets to do their stuff and now the project's late. If we identify the friction in organizations, we'd be able to help those individuals be more successful, be happier, and that would help the organization. If we could help managers understand where the friction lies, so they have a literal to-do list of this meeting needs to be altered. These people don't work well together. These people work brilliantly together. If we could give them that information, then they could create unbelievable teams. If leadership could understand where system-wide friction is occurring, then they can understand how to build strategy that works. They can constantly get data on where the friction is in the organization. And they can say, right, let's do some experiments. Let's change this. Let's pull this lever. What we're going to do is going to move from annual releases of our software to every 6 months. Let's see how that goes. And the data keeps accumulating of where the friction is. And it feeds back to the leaders if it's right or if it's wrong. And they can change the levers. They can change things. And so what we need is a system that finds all those friction points and then highlights them in a way in dashboards and in reports that helps organizations actually understand how to do better. Because right now we say to managers and leaders, just do a good job. And managers don't have the data of what's working in their teams. They're just guessing. Leaders don't know if their strategy is working or not. So we're asking them to do a very difficult job without the data. So once I'd spent a long, long time figuring all this out, then the job was, okay, so I've got to build a tool that finds that friction. And we've done that. That's called Resonance. Resonance is the tool that helps organizations see the path of how they're going to improve. And on the way, divergent people start to learn where the friction is. which previously they couldn't do. It's an odd thing that we say to people. Could you please recognize when you're struggling? People don't know when they're struggling, because when you're struggling, you're working harder to problem, right? You don't know what you're struggling with. I was diagnosed, as I said, just a couple of years ago with autism and ADHD. My autism was almost off the charts, but I didn't know. I mean, yes, I've always been self-employed because no one will hire me despite me trying. Yes, I don't really have friends. Yes, I don't have a relationship with most people apart from my wife, but I just thought that was me. I didn't know. So if someone had said to me, why are you struggling? I wouldn't have turned around and gone, oh, I'm autistic. I didn't know, right? And even if I did, I didn't know what the underlying problem was that day. I just know I had a bad day. And so I can't understand what the underlying issue is with me. I don't know what the underlying problem is. So I sure as heck don't know what the solution is. Yeah. So if somebody says, hey, all you need to do if you need help, put your hand up and tell us what you need. I don't know I'm struggling. I don't know what the underlying problem is. I don't know what the solution is. None of that works. Inclusion doesn't work in that example. But if we give somebody neuroresonance and say, right, when you've had a rough day, go into resonance and it will reflect with you and listen and help you understand where you're struggling. Well, first of all, how empowering is that to suddenly understand what's going on? As someone who's literally had that journey in the last couple of years, trust me, it's very empowering. So resonance gives them something special in that regard. And then if they want, they can, of course, keep going that journey and keep using resonance. And the data from that is obviously all the personal information is stripped. Then that data gathers and moves up through the organization. And that is what managers and leaders get so they can get the view across the team and the organization. In answer to your question, how do we do that? That's what we've come up with. That's been the last 2 years of work of the idea and building that.
Yeah, I really like that it's not focused on accommodations as much. We spoke about the expectations that are never written down and significantly shapes an employee's experience through this question that I just asked you. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit in terms of our focus now and just ask you about the masking. Many neurodivergent individuals describe masking as a way to navigate workplace expectations. And there's obviously a massive impact on us masking throughout, like you also said. According to you, how does it impact individuals personally, but also teams and organizations over time? And how can we support individuals, not just with the resonance program, but just in general, if there isn't a resonance program yet at their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I would always caution about identifying the subgroup too much. Labels are so valuable. They're validating, they're very, very helpful. But masking is used almost exclusively in the world of neurodivergence. But when a woman goes to work and she is going through a menstrual cycle and she's in pain and she's exhausted and she's emotional and she's really, really struggling, women suffer through it silently, right? If that isn't masking, I don't know what is. We all understand masking. We all understand the concept of presenting a different version of ourselves to satisfy the audience, the larger group, right? We all know that. We all do it in certain ways, whether you change who you are when you around young people or around old people or whoever, right? We all know how to transform ourselves to be slightly different people, right? And that is valuable to understand in that way, because then it's not about I'm neurodivergent, I'm different, I'm masking. It's I'm struggling with this. I'm putting in this extra effort, which another person doesn't have to. And that's really tiring. It makes me feel sort of pushed out. It makes me feel separate. And so, I think masking is one of those things. I mean, I did it for years without knowing I was doing it. But I had no choice, right? When you go into a room, if you don't know who the people are, but they know who you are, masking is pretty much your only option, right? But I think it is one of those fascinating things that if we reframe it from a point of view of, as I said, a lady going through a menstrual cycle or going through perimenopause, this gave me such a light bulb moment. And actually, I should thank the person who did it for me. I was at an event and I got to meet this lovely chap. He had been in the British Army for, I don't know, about 20 years. And I don't just mean in the British Army. I was telling him about resonance and what we built. And he said to me, that sounds amazing for neurodivergent people, but you know who else that would help? People with PTSD. That's when I just went, resonance isn't for neurodivergent people. It's for everybody. And when it's for everybody, we're not exclusionary now. We're turning around and saying everyone struggles. Everyone has a bad day. Everyone needs a tool that helps them understand why that meeting went badly, why your presentation wasn't received well. Masking is a really good example of the things we do to cope. Lots of other things we do. But if we can start through what we're doing in Resonance and some of the other tools which I could talk about that we built, we can start building organizations that don't feel exclusionary because those differences become accepted, become normalized as differences that can be valued differently.
Yeah, I really like that because I feel like sometimes when I do advocacy work, it feels like I'm saying something and other people are saying, yeah, but I'm also struggling. Why are we focusing on neurodivergent individuals? And, obviously this is my specialty, so I'm going to focus on neurodivergent individuals, but I sometimes do feel like it's making us different.
Which has its risks.
Yeah, exactly. And then also in the end, we're all just humans. Just on planet Earth, trying to be loved and loving people and just wanting to have an easier life. So I think it would be nice if we see ourselves as part of the collective whole. And then from there on saying, okay, these are my strengths. These are my things that I need support with. I have a question about psychological safety because that's obviously something that we want to work towards as therapists in general, but also just, I think, as humans and definitely in the workplace. What does it look like, psychological safety for neurodivergent employees? And why is this important for people to feel comfortable bringing their ideas, perspectives, and strengths to work, and how?
Psychological safety is a tricky phrase because most people don't understand it at all. So let's just explain a bit about what it is, first of all. Psychological safety is the idea that someone can make a mistake and feel they won't get in a lot of trouble for it.
I've never felt like that.
Exactly. And that's the reality. It's not often found because we tend to think of psychological safety as being something that's given, that somebody gives. If I say to somebody, you are psychologically safe, do you think they're going to feel psychologically safe? No, they're going to feel like they're being told something that has no evidence, and even the way it's being told to them seems contrary to what's being said. So what we start to recognize is most of the models that preach about psychological safety are about leaders doing something for their people. And that's nice. Who doesn't like freedom? Who doesn't like that? But the problem is, if psychological safety is about someone giving something to somebody, there's the obvious corollary effect. They can take it away. And so most models of psychological safety are not psychological safety. They are ways for leaders to show their power. And so early on in my psychological journey, I guess, I learned very quickly to reject most concepts of psychological safety. The way it should work, at least in my opinion, is that, yes, the leader certainly needs to give some freedom, absolutely. But that's not psychological safety. The safety is achieved when the individual looks at the environment around them and decide they can do what they want. They can decide that they are safe. That psychological safety is based on the individual and the environment that they sense, not upon what somebody else is giving them. Unless we build environments that way, we're not going to achieve it. One of the ways we're trying to do that is creating a slightly different environment. So let's talk about neurodivergence and how safe it is or isn't. Obviously, the clue is here. It isn't very safe to be. Let's take a young lady, let's say she's 16 years old, and she is at school. She has ADHD. Fortunately, the schools recognize that. She's being diagnosed early and she's being supported. She's not doing brilliantly in her studies because it's very hard for her, but she is succeeding. She reaches the age of 18. She's completed her studies and she's doing okay. As I said, she's not brilliant, but she's doing well. She's passing. She's now thinking about the next stage of her life. And this is a big step for anybody, right? Whenever you go to a new environment, for example, going from high school to university, the problem is you know the current environment. Safe, not safe, at least you know it. It's a known quantity. The university environment, the next place that you're looking to go to, you don't know anything about. It could be safe or it might not be. That transition point is a big one for anybody, but more so for someone who's neurodivergent who needs certain levels of support, right? The risk is real. She could go to university and if there's no support, she won't be able to survive. And so At that moment, the psychological safety is non-existent, and it's irrelevant to her even what she's going to study. Because if she fails, if she drops out of the university, well, it doesn't matter if she's studying criminology or history. A non-degree is a non-degree, right? It doesn't matter. So she's not sat there thinking, what should I study? She's sat there going, is this university safe? Is it going to help me succeed? Or am I going to struggle and then pass out and fall out of the university? And so how do we change our psychological safety? We have thought about that one as well. We go into organizations now and we want to help them be successful with resonance and other tools. We want to build better organizations. That's not free, not least because if stuff's free, organizations don't invest in it. If it costs money, well, they want return on their investment, right? So things need to be charged if you want them to have value. So we go in and we help that organization go on that journey to become more inclusive, to actually understand what that means. Not in the old traditional way of be nice to people and give them headphones and a room to go and sit in, like they've been a naughty child. We actually help them change and understand what it means and help resonance bed in to help them be successful. After that investment, they're going to want to shout about it. They're going to want to say, look what we've done. And so we have an accreditation that can only be achieved by organizations after they've made the changes. It's not a 500 quid, give us a badge. This is proof of the investment you've made in your organization and the amount you've changed. Now you have that qualification called the Neuro Standard. You can put that on top of your building and say, we've done this, we've achieved this, we've shown that this is important to us. Well, let's imagine that organization is a university. That young lady is going to look at all the universities in the land and she is going to go, hold on a minute, that university is actually invested and said, we are a safe space.
Nice. I like
so
that.
now that step is so much easier for her. She's not looking about the courses. She's going, that university, what courses do they do? And therefore, which course am I going to do? What that does, the Neuro Standard, it takes inclusion and makes it a competitive advantage. It makes that university more attractive to getting better talent, to getting more income, to being more successful. And we can make that happen in any organization. And I think that is, and we hope it is, game changing. It's taken a lot of work and thought over the last 2 years to build this. But if we could make inclusion a competitive advantage to a business, to a university, to a school, to a charity, to a government, we could really change a lot. It could be a big deal.
And I think your example was perfect because I had lived myself throughout that example because I didn't know what I was going to study. I had studied in America, like I said before, and I was moving from South Africa to America. So I was just stressed about even the language. I know I can speak English well, but it's different. The culture, the change, the move, the everything, the university, the people. And I wasn't even thinking what I was going to study when I got there. I just said, I just want to be a psychologist for animals. And they're like, we don't do that. So, and I was like, okay, next best thing is humans. They would just do human psychology. It's fine. I think it would be a lot nicer if I saw, okay, this organization is really invested in true inclusion of everyone and it's a competitive advantage. I really like that. What about the policy? We spoke a bit about this now, but the policy or systemic changes that you encourage to prioritize to address psychological safety and masking, if we can just kind of wrap those two up in one.
I think the reality is that organizational leaders, a CEO or a dean or chancellor or whatever, are given next to no help or tools to achieve psychological safety, to reduce masking. They're literally just told, we should have these things. We should be better. We should treat our people well. And broadly, everyone agrees. But if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the ability, if you don't have the metrics, then why do we expect that they should be able to achieve that? Right? I think we are asking too much of organizations and giving them too little to achieve the goals. That's how we've been building what's called the neuro ecosystem, which is the products and the tools for organizations to be successful in this manner. Because as I explained, lots of these things are great buzzwords, things that we should be doing. But if we don't give people the ability to achieve them, then it's just smoke and mirrors. These things should be measurable. We should be able to measure and comprehend inclusion.
Yeah.
Right? We should be able to comprehend where friction lies in our organizations. If we can't, well, then why are we surprised that we're not achieving change? And so that's why we went down this path of building what we built. And in this way, we can give to organizations the ability to understand it. Because currently, most organizations that I've seen in this space, it's about going into an organization and saying, hello, we're here to do neurodiversity awareness or autism awareness. If you want an example of how bonkers that is, why don't we do men awareness or women awareness? Right? That's how bonkers it is. But we just don't think about it. We don't really analyze it. It's not about awareness. Awareness says they're different and weird and we don't know them and they're humans, right? They are no different. The variation in our DNA, because it's so complex across humans, means the differences between us are humongous across a population. And so, of course, there's lots of differences. Of course, there's variation. Why would we try and think that that's not the case?
Yeah.
Organizations need to be built for the population, not for one type.
And I think it's also really sad that we need to do that advocating for ourselves. So all of these friction points that you're talking about, it would be really nice if the organization themselves just know about these.
Absolutely.
But what about disclosure? I know that I'm going back to the old system here, but not everybody is using the Neuro program, which would be lovely if that was included with Neuro nuggets from Caboose and everything was available for the organization and the individuals. But what about the disclosure and individual adjustments as part of the approach to supporting neurodivergent individuals? Is there room for that? Why is it only part of the picture? What can organizations do to create more of a proactive support? Again, knowing that this would be the ideal standard to be accredited through Neuro with Caboose and everyone else as part of it. But what's more realistic?
Yeah, I think, again, it's about reframing. A lot of the thinking in organizations is very Victorian. What I mean by that is it's old organizational thinking from the factory floor from the 1800s, right? If somebody needs something, then that's bad, effectively, right? If they don't just fit in, then that's bad. And so people get excluded because they need something. It almost becomes hilarious. I was at a conference and there was a panel before the panel I was on, and there was a lady up there and she was a head of HR, as all of the people on these panels and speakers always are, which is always hilarious because they know nothing about the topic, absolutely nothing. They're literally the customers that need help, and we see them as the experts. It makes no sense. But anyway, somebody in the audience asked her, so, well, what do you do for your autistic employees? And she was so smug. She was just said, oh, well, we asked them. What is the point of asking somebody what they need? They don't know. If they knew, they'd already have it. It's absurd. But anyway, that's what they did. As with any group who are a minority, masking kicks in. They want to fit in. They don't want to make a fuss because they know they'll get seen and be in trouble. And so what did they put in place based upon the feedback? This lady so proudly told the audience they had got them all fidget toys and put plants in the office. It's just so bloody insulting. And she thought she'd solved it. She was so happy. And you're just like, my God, how are you in HR? How easy is your career been? You got to that level of thinking.
I like fidgets, but what was the thing with the plants? What was the reason?
Well, obviously, it was a situation where these people are getting asked, what do you need? And they're like, well, we don't know. So let's just say something that would be nice. We'll be like plants. Oh, let's get some plants. Yeah, we'd like the plants. That would help us deal with our autism. This is the problem. Organizations, and then the neurodivergent people are a big part of the problem because we don't know the solution. We want to placate our masters and tell them everything's okay, it's fine, we don't need much. But this is what everyone does, right? If business leaders were smart, they'd stop thinking like Victorian leaders and quite simply go, well, the more comfortable our people are, the happier they are. Well, they'll be more productive. They'll get more done. They'll be able to do more things. Heating pads in the office. Any woman who is going through the period, here's a heating pad. Here's a more comfortable chair. You want a blanket? No problems at all. Here's a blanket. Whatever you guys need. We just want you to be happy. It costs us almost nothing, but we'll have a better workforce. Inclusion is not about saying to a person, what do you need? It's about recognizing we are a population of human beings with lots of different needs. And the more your needs are met, the happier, more successful you're going to be. One of the biggest costs for companies, and you touched on this earlier, is recruitment. If they lose people that transition out, that leave their company, it's hugely expensive, right? And just takes a lot of time as well. If you have an environment that's really good for your employees, they'll be much less likely to leave. This is such a small investment in your ways of working, but it's just so logical. And this is the kind of stuff we can change. It doesn't take much. When we go into an organization as Neuro, this is the sort of stuff we'll talk about. And for the most part, people just go, oh, I never even thought about this. Why didn't we do this before? And we start making better organizations. We only registered the charity in March. It's very early days, but we're getting going. We're partnered with about 10 universities now, about 8 in the UK, 1 in Australia, and we're in talks with the University of Cyprus.
We do need more people listening to the conversation, not just from a awareness point of view. Like you said, it's not just, okay, what do we need to do extra for the small population of people? If you make it into everybody needs something at some point, and if we're all just a little bit happier and a little bit more content in our workplace, then everything will be better. We won't drop out. It's an understanding of what each person needs for their personhood to flourish. I just want to make sure that we get to this question from Lee, because it's such a good question. Yeah. Is there a way for neurodivergent people to manage expectations of their neurotypical peers at the same job level as them? Or is that more for the leaders to figure out?
Well, let's first of all just recognize it's difficult, right? But the main reason it's difficult is that most people, and I'm including neurodivergent people in this, don't understand neurodivergence.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Until you have an experience of something and until you actually understand it, it's very hard to recognize it and have it in your life. There's not many times that people get involved in a cause that they don't have a personal connection with. So the reality is your neurotypical peers quite likely don't understand neurodivergence. And that's normal. That's okay. That's not a bad thing. That is what you'd expect. The first thing is about education. But you can't just go to somebody and say, hi, I'm here to tell you about autism. Again, back to my line from earlier, meet people where they are. When I want to connect with somebody and talk to them about something they don't know, the only way I do it is I will want to learn about them first, right? So they have difficulties too, just like you do, right? They're different, but they still have difficulties. And so if you talk to them and be sympathetic and understand where they're struggling, then they at some point will in turn turn around and go, so where are you struggling? And then it's a discussion of equals. If you go in and just go, hi, I've got this problem, you're not equal. You're lesser because your value is dropped because you've got that problem. But if you discuss it as equals and you start with understanding them, then it really does work.
Lee is just saying thanks for answering the question.
Yep. Thank you, Lee. I see that as well. I hope it was an okay answer.
Yeah, I think it's a good answer. We're unfortunately running out of time, Robert. I could speak to you for a lot longer. I just want to quickly ask you if there's anything specific, if a leader or a manager is listening right now, is there maybe one thing that you want them to take from this talk today and that they can implement in their organization?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. What we're doing with Neuro, we believe is going to change the world, is going to change how organizations be successful. I don't mean that as an ego. I mean it because it's unacceptable where we are currently with people really struggling, with people being excluded. It's not okay. It's 2026. We should have achieved more by now. But I would say if you're a leader, if you're listening to this, I would say, give me a call, because the first organizations who start doing it will be the ones that are most competitive. If you can make a better organization where your people are happier, more successful, where you're much more productive because you've got all that innovation or that problem solving skills opened up, then you're going to be better than your competitors. And that way you become a beacon to other organizations. You become that one leading the way. And don't we all want to be leading? I think if we go out there and make inclusion the thing that makes organizations win, well, then inclusion wins. And that's not a bad day. That would be a good day.
I love it. Let's end on that. That's like a drop mic moment. So I just want to quickly wrap up by saying thank you so much, Robert, for your time. I really appreciate it. And you gave some really good tips for employees, but also employers. And I really like the way that you see things from a systemic point of view. This is a reminder to all the audience members that we have a range of divergent discussions coming up. You can check those out at the Caboose app, as well as our newly launched Neuro Nuggets. Neuro Nuggets are short, practical guides that help you understand how your brain works and find ways to make work and life easier. They're also for workplaces to help create more inclusive spaces created by and for neurodivergent individuals, but also the people that work with us. Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you for everybody that
My pleasure.
listened.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll chat soon.